This video will provide you training for the May 2017 STAAR EOC testing at Mesquite High School. Just keep in mind that the content of a packet or the training itself never takes the place of the contents of either your oral accommodations, administration manual, or your actual EOC testing manual. It's important that you follow everything that is within those guidelines, but yet operate on the contents of the manual because that's specific to our school. If you'd like a paper copy of this packet, if you would just send me an email and let me know that, I will be glad to provide one for you. One will be supplied every day in your testing bucket, but please don't substitute the contents of the packet for the different forms that are required on testing days. Those are color-coded and specific to each test. On Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, May 1st, 3rd, and 4th, we will be administering the biology, U.S. history, and Algebra 1 EOCs as noted on this page. Students that are testing need to be here at normal school time, no later than 8:45 in their assigned testing rooms, and non-testers will arrive in their late to 3rd period or to 7th period once at 12:30. So begin making these announcements next week. It's very specific, but the biggest thing I can say is student locations are going to be rolled out later today, and they're going to be posted as well. Begin communicating with all your students. Please don't make the assumption that you don't have any students that take the test. We have retesters, we have students that test at different grade levels, also because they take the course at different times. So we begin with biology, and then we go to U.S. history, and then algebra, and those color codes are going to be very similar to what you see in these packets and what's notated in this training. Kids will be able to find rosters, total alpha rosters in the cafeteria between A and C, at the T, and at the entrance at lower M Hall. Students will stay in their testing rooms until announcements made to go to 3A or 7B. Students that have extra time will have until the end of the school day, but if you're administering a test in one of those rooms, they're all in K Hall. If you're administering a test in one of those rooms and you have students that are finished when the announcement is made, then those students can be released to go to their regular schedule as well. You just may need to remind them where they are going. We just need to make sure that everybody's on time that day if they're not testing, and that kids are here if they are to be testing. Room checks, that's going to take place on Thursday, April 27th. Remember, we got to cover walls, hallways, bathrooms, any place that there is something that has a project or notation or anything that could help or hinder a kid in the areas of U.S. history, math, or biology. So history, science, math, it could help hinder any one of those days. It already needs to be taken care of before those room checks happen on Thursday, April 27th. Also, any covering that you have on the windows of your classrooms, that needs to be taken care of as well. You need to have a minimum of 30 desks in rooms where you're going to have 30 students, and you'll be able to see that later on in the packet. All the staffing specifics will go out on Monday. This is going out today just to serve as your training so that you can be familiar with what is going to happen next week or the week after next, so that next week you can communicate with students. Staff assignments and the quiz for content that will document your training will also go out on Monday. All right, we haven't really changed anything as far as maroon team, white team, runners, lunches, pacers, restroom duty, hall people. The biggest change I can say is English test, you're given 5 hours. Every test in May is a 4-hour time limit, 4 hours. And Guidelines are very specific in the manual as to when you remind students about time and all that, and those page numbers are in your checklist, and we'll get to those in a minute. 4 hours is the time limit. You have a start time for the room. You'll have to account for lunches, but 4 hours is all that they get unless they have extra time. And at that point, they do have till the end of the school day. Taking attendance, remember that's done right after you start your kids, and then you'll recheck it just before 10 and put the testing books and answer documents with it of absent students. Students can arrive late. You're going to want to start as quickly as you can, get things accounted for. If a student arrives to you after 10, it would be a special circumstance, but no matter what, students will be escorted to you if they are late, and we need to get someone in the hallway to read to them if you do not have 2 people in the room. So everybody make sure that you have both your oral administration manual and your EOC manual on that day. Lunch, really no change from our lunches in for English. Follow the plan. We have to be very diligent to the times that are given before us, because it will throw the whole school off if someone decides to go their own way. Monitoring cards, they're a little bit more crucial this time around, because a lot of rooms on Maroon team, you may only have 1 teacher in there. White team, definitely 1 teacher per room. And our people in our hallway are very sparing, but this way we do get to rotate staff members. This way we all get time in and out of a testing area, and we can also take care of our kids, which is, of course, the bottom line. Accommodations are no different. You can only read questions and answer choices. This is talking about the English portion because that's just a little bit different, and so that's always notated here when it comes to our accommodations, but we're not giving any kind of English or writing at this point. It's just math, biology, Algebra 1, biology, and U.S. history. If it is online, just FYI, if it is online and it says text to speech, those are your only students that are going to need headphones, but most of the time if you're online, people have that accommodation. Headphones are provided. Make sure to give every student, whether it's their ticket, their book, their answer document, supplemental aid, whatever it is, extra time, make sure that whatever is on the accommodation sheet, you are providing that accommodation for students. Electronic devices. Please remember, if you're using one as a staff member, if you're using one as a timer, that's all it should be used for, and you need to place it on silent. Shouldn't be engaging in any kind of communication with that phone. In rare instances, when it's necessary, towards the end of our testing time, Mr. Samples may send out a remind, but in no way, shape, form should we ever be just texting or communicating in any way from any electronic device. It's in violation of active monitoring, as well as all the directives from state, district, and campus regarding testing. Student devices, remember students you're going to request for all electronic devices from students, and as they arrive, they should label them, turn them off, give them to you, and then they stay within your care until the announcement's made. When an announcement's made, it's going to be made for us to go to 3A or 7B, depending on what day it is. Monday and Wednesday, 3A, Thursday, 7B. And the announcement will be made, and then we will ring a bell to tell people that they can release. So you'll have time from the time the announcement's made to get the phones out. We don't need students to have possession of the phones. Everyone is not finished testing just because your room's finished testing, and it's just not a good practice for us to go ahead and give those out. Students, when they're finished with their test, they can read a book, but nothing can have been at their desk when they arrive other than what you provide for them. So if they're going to read a book, they need to tell you about that ahead of time so you can hand it to them once they've given you their test. Anything else is really a violation of directives. They can't be writing, drawing, anything to do with paper and pencil. So they can take a nap or they can read. And then they're just going to need to be patient for the people, rooms around you may still be testing. Someone in your room still may be testing. Checklist. There's a checklist for paper test, a checklist for online test. Every single thing that you need to know to have a smooth testing day and be on the same page with everyone at our school is in the checklist. And you do sign off on the checklist, so it helps if you actually check things off as you go, and then you'll know you haven't missed anything. And if something arises that isn't covered on here, then you can give us a call at 6520 if you have a question that comes up that you're just not sure what to do. And 6520, that's the number that we use during testing to access the testing office. Someone will be at that phone at all times. It's not the phone number we always use, but it's the one we use during testing. Make note that I have the page number on here for your directions. There's a blurb in here about calculators. For biology, that's on Wednesday. Oh, I apologize. Biology is actually on Monday. Calculators for biology, that should say Monday. So we're going to correct that as we are in here. Those are provided by the science department. Ms. Albrecht's been working on those. We have to have a 1 to 5 ratio, 1 calculator for every 5 students. We actually will provide 10 calculators per room about that, and that will give us a 1 to 3 ratio, so we are well in compliance with what the guidelines are. Students only need to use a calculator at max for 1 question, from what I'm told, based on the makeup of the test. Max, it's 1 question that it can be used for, and a 4-function calculator will handle that. If your room has provided something other than a calculator, other than a simple calculator, a calculator that requires a memory change, then you'll be provided instructions on how to do so, and you need to make sure and clear that memory between student uses. So every time a student is finished and they raise their hand and someone else needs a calculator, once that transfer takes place, we need to make sure that we are clearing the memory if that is required of the calculator you have. Now, big change. On Thursday, this is what we already know. What we already know on Thursday is that is our Algebra 1 day, and students will use graphing calculators that they're familiar with using in Algebra 1 classes. They will come to you with memory cleared. They will already be waiting for you on both days. Those calculators will be waiting for you. Keep in mind that's part of someone's inventory. They belong to the school. We need to take care of them. They're expensive to replace, and they're part of someone's curriculum. So make sure that we are taking care of what is given to us and our kids to use on that day. If you're given 30 calculators, you'll be expected to still have 30 calculators when they're picked up. There's no need for you to turn those in anywhere. Remember, recording the start time, you do that several places, and they all need to match. We want to get that as close to 9:15 as possible. If you're ready to start before 9:15, then you go right ahead, and just keep in mind you may have some late testers and stragglers that come in. Just take your attendance by 10, and we'll move on from there. Actively monitoring is something that's put in your checklist over and over. Remember to be actively monitoring. That doesn't mean you have to be pacing constantly. Remember, that makes kids a little bit nervous. Know what's going on in your room, because you're the only eyes and ears we have in there. And a lot of times it is just 1 testing administrator per room, because we do go to 3rd period. Everyone goes to 3rd period. It makes everyone not testing, goes to 3rd period. And this is a smaller amount of tests per day, testers per day. It makes things a little more streamlined when it comes to our staffing. It's also AP testing time, and we have several things going on. So we're doing everything we can to try to get you to be able to start with 2 people in the room, but we need to go ahead and have a shout out for somebody that was a big example to us in March. Coach Hill did it with flying colors that first day. He was in there all by himself. So it can be done. You will be fine, and you know you are getting a built-in break in your rotation. All right. The turn-in, it's important that you follow. Everything is important that you follow what we put on the checklist. If it wasn't important, we wouldn't put it there. So make sure that your scratch paper is together in its own thing. And we're going to ask you to break down your box once you come to turn in. We'll have bins set out or boxes set out for you to put things in your room to break it down so that when you get to the table, the only thing left in there is things that you need to turn into us, your answer documents, which should match the number of books that you have to turn in. We'll pick up your ones for for absent students, but everything else should match. But by the time you get to the table for one of the people from the testing office to check in, there should be, everything else should be broken down out of your box. So make sure that when you're turning in as well, that you've taken care of all the things you've been asked to do. Okay, and we'll get through some of those in some of these sample forms. Online testing rooms, they are a little bit different. And so there is a checklist and compliance sheet for them. It's a little offset. It has online. We try to differentiate between the two. K8, 9, 10, 12, and 7 will always be online rooms. On Thursday, K3 and 5 will be utilized as well as online rooms. So please, please make sure that we are doing what needs to be done to be in compliance with every bit of the checklist, your checklist, your manual, whatever the guidelines that are set before you, we are going to adhere to those. Okay, also, I didn't say this on the other checklist, I'm just glancing through. Make sure you read your instructions ahead of time. There are insets in those instructions in your manual, and they say for an Algebra 1 test, for a biology test. It's specific to test. So make sure you are taking care of that. Okay? Moving on. After the checklist, you have the roster. This is going to be provided for you. Test administrators' names. Mostly it's going to, it should just include, at minimum, it will include the maroon team representatives for that room. Start, stop time. That's the time for the entire room. You will only have a start, stop at the beginning of the day when you officially start. You'll stop for lunch. You'll restart. And then your final time, the last kid stops, or when the end of time is called. That's your final stop. So you shouldn't be using all three of these unless we had some kind of crazy emergency, which, Lord willing, that will not happen. All right, you need to make sure to include the form number, the time they turn in, check present or absent. You're going to highlight your absent kids as it says on your checklist. You can also write absent over here on time turned in. It'll help you when you are managing this sheet. Please fill out the bottom, the total students assigned, total students absent. That reminds us absent is how many books we have of yours already. Seating chart itself, everything needs to match up. This gives us an accurate picture of what's going on between your active monitoring and this seating chart. We should pretty much know what's going on in your room. Use these seat numbers to reflect who is sitting where, what your room looks like, where they're facing. All of these things, make sure that that is taken care of. Sample accommodations page. Talked about accommodations earlier, all the different ones that are available. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. I can't reiterate enough that those are online rooms. I may mix online and paper on makeup days, but I will not do that if I can help it, which I can on all three of these days as it happens for this year. Those are totally separate. If you're in a paper room that has oral accommodations, remember this manual should stay with you. These guidelines should stay with you. This book, each person was supplied one, and in both manuals you will keep until the end of December. So they stay with you. I don't need to find any of them in my box or anything like that. All right, your table of contents tells you math, reading, science, social studies, and then it has examples. These are specific to the questions. There are ways we read abbreviations. There are ways we read timelines and numbers and maps and different things. It is all depicted in this manual. Make sure if you're in an online paper room, or if you have to modify and adjust because someone's out or someone's sick or an emergency and you get in one of those rooms, you've already been trained on this material. I'm just reviewing and showing you that you have it. And I'm scrolling through to let you know these are things you need to look over. At the end of this online administration manual, you can see the different examples of questions. And notice like this one, it says any text in the test question or answer choice may be read aloud. However, the triangle and circle should be read aloud as blank because it represents where something should be. For example, the first equation may be read aloud as blank plus blank equals 11. So this would be blank multiplied by blank equals 9. What is the value of this blank? Make sure that you are adhering to the guidelines provided. There are specific examples provided that will navigate you through this process. Okay, if it is on the accommodation sheet, we are required by law to provide it. A student does not have to use it, but we have to provide it. There are supplemental aids available for biology and for Algebra 1. U.S. History does not use a supplemental aid. So on U.S. History Day, on Wednesday, when U.S. History is given, even though it may say supplemental aid, that is if we use one, then it needs to be provided. One is not utilized in those U.S. History classes, so it would only confuse students at the time. Start, stop time. I just need to clarify on this sheet, this is to be used when an individual, let's say they have a different start time because they came in late. Then you could note their individual start time here because it's going to be different than that of your room. They'll still follow your stop and restart times for as the lunch goes or as it happens for your whole class. But when they don't arrive until after you've already started, their start time is going to be different. That means their end time or the possible end time they could have is different. This start-stop sheet, more than anything, just as it says at the top, it's for those rare emergent situations that require the student to be escorted to the clinic or out of the room by a school administrator, removing a student that will return to test. And sometimes you don't know if they're going to return. So you go ahead and put the stop time on here. And then if the decision was made that they go home, then you can say nurse sent student home. Then we have documentation of whatever's happening in the room. Sometimes something happens with a student and one of us needs to come and remove the student and speak to them and then return them. And that's okay when they're under our care. We just need to make sure that we don't take their time away, because if we're pulling them out of class to discuss something, then it is urgent. And so we need to take care of that on this stop, restart sheet. This is a sample room of your checklist. Mr. Waller provides this. Notice it says if your start time is not 9:15, as this indicates, then you need to mark through it and put what your start time for the room actually is. You cannot deviate the stop time for lunch. Most importantly, you have to be, when this says 11:10 in the cafe, you can't be there early. It'll cause a traffic jam. You can't be there late. It'll cause our schedule to be off. You need to be on time. This tells us where you pick up your kids. So let's say maroon team is the team that drops off the kids, but white team is picking them up. This tells you what tables you're going to or where you can find them if they're going to be in break. Then once you have your students back and settled in the room, because remember when you stop the test for lunch, you're going to have everyone put their answer document inside their book, pick up their books, lock them up, and then you pass them back out and redistribute after everyone is settled, all desks cleared, nobody's anywhere they're not supposed to be. and redistribute. So make sure that this is all accurate for what's happening in your room. This is an overview of all of the rooms, and this is just an example. Everything on here is just an example of what it looks like. Again, here's attendance. We take that by 10. Room log goes up the moment we go in the room for testing. Incident report. If anything takes place that is not the norm, it's not covered by your checklist, it goes outside of the box, anything at all, you need to call 6520. Let us decide what needs to proceed from there, but regardless, you document. Answer documents are supplied at the back. The best thing I can tell you is if it is notated, then it is important. These are color-coded. They appear in the order that we are testing. Everything on here is important. Read your checklist. Go by what is in this packet. Make sure that you are looking at everything. And even if I don't give verbal recognition to it, if it's in print in here or your manual, do it. Make sure that you are taking care of it. When we're talking about answer documents, that brings up a good thing with books and answer documents. Both have students' names on them. Students' names will appear here if they were pre-coded by the state. If we've already bubbled it in, it'll be here. No student should be bubbling anything in other than their form number, if you choose to read those lines in your manual, which you need to find them. The booklet number, that's it. You, as the test administrator, are going to check to make sure that this and this are correct each testing day. Then you will bubble in the test date, and you will bubble in the score code, which will be S because we will have all the absent ones. Okay, this is the overall breakdown of the room as they were yesterday at the end of the day. This is just information that you might want to have to know where the online, oral, other accommodations might be. So make sure that you are just aware of what's going on in your room and that you've taken care of the training accordingly. All right, this is a preview of your staffing. This is just a preview. It is a preview only, not to be something that you take as set in stone, but this is to help us with a guideline. For instance, on this day, this would be the biology day. There will be 3 different days, and we'll provide an alphabetical listing of these as well. A1, this would mean that Ms. Hale and Ms. Pageant both start in there on Maroon team. So they would need to discuss prior who's going to pick up the bucket. Once 3A gets here, Ms. Hale has 2 kids that are not testing. So they would need to go to the small gym. Ms. Pageant apparently has way more kids than we can pull her for 3A. So she is only going to be on the Maroon team from 8:15 to 10:30. And then she's through with her testing duty. And her time is a little bit different. Y'all should make note of that. If there's a time set aside here, maybe you are off campus most of the day, but you start out here at the beginning of the day, you'll probably be asked to be in a testing room until it's time for you to leave so that we can at least start the day with 2 people per room. A hall, C hall, any of the hallway or restroom people, there are notes over here about your schedule. Anything that's highlighted or notated, it's beside the people it pertains to. Make sure to read these things thoroughly so that you're in the right place and can be in compliance with everything that we're asked to do. There are additional duties down here. If you need something described to you that isn't covered, then you just need to come and visit with me. But again, this is a sample. Please don't think this is set in stone. I will say that if there are any rooms for white team where there are 2 people, there will be very few. So if you're in place where you're supposed to be, you've read over your material, you know your manual, then we're going to be in good shape. The biggest thing I can say is prepare yourself, but prepare your kids. Please, please, please don't take for granted that you teach majority juniors and seniors, and so none of your kids should be testing. That's just not necessarily true. Kids take classes in different orders. kids need retesting for various reasons. Please don't assume anything. Just check the alpha listing of all your students and let them know what days they need to test. This will complete our training portion. Again, the quiz and staffing will be sent to you on Monday. And once you have completed your quiz, which you'll want to look at your staffing to complete your quiz, you will be ready to test beginning May 1st. Thank you for your time.